Thank you for tuning in to Ending the Arkansas Opidemic, the vodcast that takes a deep dive into the opioid epidemic in Arkansas. Here, we will talk about life-changing impact that opioids are having on Arkansans and speak to the people that have seen the devastating effects of opioid misuse firsthand. My name is Kirk Lane, and I am the Arkansas Drug Director, and I will be your host for this vodcast. My hope is that this program can bring awareness to the opioid epidemic in Arkansas and help us all work together to prevent opioid misuse and abuse and save the lives of countless Arkansans. Joining us today is Kevin Cleghorn, Saline County Coroner and Arkansas Coroners Association President, to talk about the role of the coroners in our opioid epidemic, new programs and technology coming available in this effort, and drug trends and overdose deaths. So Kevin, thank you for being here today, and it's a beautiful day that we have here. So
it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So Kevin, let's just dive right into it. Tell us, why are you a coroner?
Why am I a coroner? Actually, to tell the truth, I kind of stumbled into the job. I'm a retired 30-year paramedic. Spent 30 years in Central Arkansas, on an ambulance and various services. The coroner in Saline County, where I've lived and was raised all my life, he was in his 60s and was working himself in the ground, and I offered to help him one day in 2006. Wasn't until a year later he brought me on board part-time, and I began to learn this side of deaths, not just saving the life, but what happens after the fact. 2011, I became the first chief deputy coroner for Saline County, and 4 years later, was elected the coroner when Mr. Bearden retired. So I laugh and joke about it because I kind of stumbled into the job, but it has been an honor, and it is an honor to serve Saline County in this role. As a paramedic, I would go on calls all hours of the day and night for so many different things that may not be an emergency to me, but was to them. Now when I go out, there are hurting people. And to be able to put the pieces of the puzzle together now and help gain closure and explain the deaths, working with our law enforcement to do that, it's an honor to be able to do that for the citizens that we serve. So that's how I came to be the coroner, and then in 2017 I was voted and nominated as the president by my peers throughout the state of Arkansas as the president of the Coroners Association, and been serving in that capacity since then.
That's fantastic, and thank you for your service. I know in working side by side with you in my latter day, in my other hat, we worked a lot of cases together.
Yes,
and we solved a lot of puzzles. So I appreciate that. But I really appreciate the fact of your abilities as a leader in the Coroners Association. You've made some tremendous changes in there. And so tell us about the Coroners Association. What do they do?
The Coroners Association, one of the biggest misconceptions is that we're an oversight agency for all the coroners across the state. We're not. Coroners are constitutional officers. They're elected by the constituents of their counties. What the association's role in the state primarily consists of being an educational agency and a legislative agency. We are at Capitol Hill during legislative sessions, working on laws that will enhance and better the jobs of the coroners across the state, for the citizens as well as for their offices. We are also an educational agency. We have partnered with multiple agencies across the state. CLEST, your office, we've partnered with the State Crime Lab, the Arkansas Department of Health, and multiple others in bringing in educational programs to Arkansas. The most recent, there were laws passed that requires, much like our law enforcement, a sheriff does not have to be a certified law enforcement officer, but every deputy underneath him does. We now have laws that the coroners, even though they are not required to be certified death investigators, every deputy underneath them in the state is required to have a minimal level of standards of training much like our law enforcement, and be certified in death investigation. So programs like that, infant death investigation, drug-related investigations. There's so many different programs that we have. We bring in some of the country's leading experts in these fields to bring their programs in. You know, the trends that we're seeing, not just in Arkansas but nationwide. That is primarily what we do. And then the third aspect of the association is to provide our coroners across the state resources and equipment that they need to do their jobs. And, you know, even though it's the county's responsibility to take care of their coroners' offices, a lot of times our coroners will reach out to our association, you know, needing suggestions on vendors for whatever supplies they need and so forth. And we have agencies that are in need of computers. So we have partnerships with the Arkansas Department of Health and agencies like that are help us with grants to be able to provide those resources for our coroners. So we have multiple goals, multiple tasks that we do throughout the state. So overall, that's what we are.
Good deal. So I know in your hands-on experience that you have seen trends change in death. Tell me about that from when you started out to where you're at right now.
Statewide, I mean, and I can speak mostly for Saline County, but you know, statewide, we're seeing an overall increase in our deaths across the state. I mean, there's more and more every day. Some people contributed to the opioids, some contributed to COVID, some contributed to just, you know, our generation is getting older, so there's more dying off, you know, the baby boomers and so forth. I don't know that we can contribute it to one specific thing, but overall, statewide, it's getting busier everywhere. Saline County, we're already over 100 cases or more from where we were this time last year. Our suicide rate is at an all-time high. Our homicide rate is at an all-time high. Our drug overdoses are at an all-time high. So we're seeing a huge trend in our, statistically, 2/3 of the coroner's offices caseload are natural deaths. Well, that is the trends that we're seeing. That's narrowing, you know, and that's sad. That's a statistic that I would really rather see go back the other direction, you know, to where, you know, we get closer to 100% as natural and we don't see the overdoses and the suicides and the homicides and things like that. But that ratio is narrowing.
So I know we're talking today specifically about opioids and overdose death. In your tenure as a coroner, how has that changed for you?
It grows day by day. I know your office, and along with ours and multiple agencies, you know, we have fought this. We're still fighting on a statewide level the opioid epidemic. You know, where we see initially, we would see more of our overdoses were illicit drugs. Mm-hmm. You know, the methamphetamines and you know, things like that. We're seeing more now our synthetic opioids. Then it'll trend to the pills, the prescription opioids, the morphines, and so forth. You know, it's like when we fight one aspect of it, another one will raise its head.
Right.
And which you see that all over the state as well, all over the country. But I think from when I started to now, our drug deaths are just rampant. And I can't tell you how many times that I have families from all walks of life sitting across my desk. And every one of them says the exact same thing. My family wouldn't do that. there's not a whole lot I can say to that, without using science to say, here's why we say that. So, I'm having way too many people sitting across my desk that I'm having to talk to them about drug-related deaths and more opioids than anything else.
So a lot of your job is about science.
It is.
And following practices and procedures in investigating an overdose or an opioid death. How has that changed? I mean, what are you doing now that you didn't do 10 years ago, and how important is that in your determination of what it is?
So I'll take that one step at a time.
Okay.
In years past, a lot of the coroners across the state would, and even some are still doing this today, which is some of the reasons why we don't have accurate statistical data anymore. But they would draw toxicology, send them to the crime lab, wait and release the body, and so forth. That in and of itself doesn't give us the full picture of the cause of death or the manner of death. In order to determine that, the investigation has grown, and the scope of the coroner's responsibility across the state in the last, I'd say in the last decade or a little more, to determine a cause of death and determine an opioid-related death. It's going to take a full, comprehensive medico-legal death investigation that's done on our side. Whereas law enforcement, they have to have warrants to get medical records. They have to jump through hoops a lot of times to get a lot of that. Coroner's offices can get that information where law enforcement can't. That's where we're talking about earlier, the pieces of the puzzle. That's our piece of the puzzle, the legal and the medical side of that death. We don't do the criminal side. That's law enforcement. So law enforcement conducting that comprehensive investigation together. And then the third piece of that puzzle is autopsy. It is the national standards recommendation, even though there's no law that says we are required to do so. It's national standards in death investigation of a drug-related death that it goes for an autopsy. Number one, you've got a forensic pathologist that's looking at the body, determining are there disease processes that these drugs complicated that sped up the death, or was it just the drug by itself, which is a huge piece of that puzzle. And then you've got forensic toxicologists that are looking at that drug sample, that blood sample, plus what the law enforcement is sending in from the scene, comparing, is this the same drug that they pulled from the scene? Then we can put all of those pieces of the puzzle together and say, this is the cause of death, this is why, and this is how. That has evolved greatly in the last decade. I don't think that there was that accurate of a death investigation in these kind of deaths in the years past, and a large part of our state. And you may see it in some of our larger counties where they've been doing this for a while, but that's not the norm back then. It is now.
And I think that's a good thing, from my perspective of being law enforcement, 10, 15 years ago when we went to an overdose, that's where that investigation stopped. But a lot of times now, that's where that investigation begins. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to find who poisoned that person and hold them responsible for that person's death. And also, I think most importantly, give some answers to the family that they never had before.
Absolutely. I agree.
And that's a huge thing, because a lot of times that helps with closure, that helps with understanding, and that helps them with their future, because it's devastating to the family. And I think you feel that pressure a lot of times as a coroner, trying to give them those correct answers.
I do.
Yeah. So moving forward with your investigation, I think you had related that you're working closer with law enforcement, much like you would a homicide case in the past, to answer those death issues in there now with overdoses. So that's
Correct.
Increasing. So that takes a lot of your time and a lot of your effort moving forward. How do you manage that?
Very carefully, very carefully. You know, we give our 100% to every scene, and in truth, the approach to any death that we go to now, every death is a homicide until proven otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a national standard. Our goal is to prove what did or did not happen. You know, and there are, on any given scene, there are so many different people that can lie to us. The body will never lie to us. You know, being able to look at that body and tell them this doesn't fit what you're seeing on this scene. The scene belongs to law enforcement. We'll tell coroners all day long, that scene belongs to the law enforcement. The body is ours. You know, we have to put those together and you know, make sure that we do have all those answers. But being able to know, number one, what the drugs are doing and what we're seeing with that body versus what law enforcement is seeing is a huge aspect. There are several tools that we utilize to do that, you know, but the biggest tool that we use is our crime lab. That is the huge, that you know, whereas in the homicide that you're referring to, that homicide is going to go to the crime lab. If we're treating every death as a homicide, and this is you know, on the flip side, what you're talking about on the law enforcement looking for someone who is who's supplying this, who's causing this death, why would we not send that for utilize all of the resources that we have to investigate this death? You know, so I think that's you know, working with our law enforcement is probably one of the most crucial aspects of any death investigation.
So going back to the Coroners Association, having that training, having those abilities to learn from people that have had hands-on in these type new investigations into overdoses and opioid overdoses specifically is invaluable.
It is.
So statistic-wise, I know in your finding the result of somebody's death and you reporting that, how does that process work?
Statistically, over the state of Arkansas, and I'm almost ashamed to say this. Well, I am ashamed to say this. There's 75 counties, 75 coroners, and up until recently, there's been 75 different reporting systems across the state of Arkansas. You know, you and I have had conversation in the past that, you know, a lot of our grants are based on statistical data from 3 to 4 years past. You know, we're still looking at 2018, 2019 data to gain grants for current day drug interdiction and so forth. I think a lot of that is because there's not been a central location for statistical reporting from our coroners across the state. We've been working very closely with multiple agencies, the Crime Lab, Aurora, our law enforcement standards and training, to bring a universal system all the way up to the Attorney General, to your office, to the Governor's office, a standardized reporting system in the state of Arkansas. That is what's called MDI log is the program that we're using. We have probably maybe 40 counties that are utilizing it to some degree or another. Some of them may just have logins and have not begun utilizing that. But even to the point, our medical examiner's office is even on board 100%. We have a new chief medical examiner that is here in Little Rock now, that came from Michigan, where MDI log was kind of born, so to speak. It was developed and created, and the entire state of Michigan is on MDI log. That's what he knows. Right. So he's very fluent with it, and you know, it gives us a location for the first time ever where we can utilize and tap in to statewide information. Everything that is input into MDI log for our case files, it builds a database, and we're able to go in on a state level and draw statistical information from it. But not only that, it also allows us to it serves as a body submission form. So when we create the case right there on scene, and when we select, we're going to send this body for an autopsy, as soon as we activate that case, the crime lab in the medical examiner's office can read our reports immediately and see everything from the scene. Now, they can't change it or anything, but they can see what's coming, and that has become our body submission. Not only that aspect, we can actually share that information with our law enforcement, with our prosecuting attorney's offices, with the Department of Health statistics, so but it still stays proprietary to the coroner's office. They can't change anything, and the demographics and everything is protected. The case file itself is protected. They don't have access to the case file. They have access to that statistical information. The only one that really has access is the one we give access to.
So let me ask you this: in the MDI log, which is medical legal death investigators log, right?
Yes.
So having that ability and being able to function with that could basically in the palm of their hand with their phone, they could fill out that.
Absolutely.
They could fill out that form, and then once they hit enter, they could push it real time. So in a perfect world, you could get answers very quickly.
Very quickly.
In the world that we live in now, or the world that we have been living in some parts of the states, what's that timeline like?
Months at times. Months. Waiting on results, waiting on reports to be done.
And I know a lot of things compound on the other.
It does.
And so it could be 6, 8 months or better sometime for people to get answers.
It could.
To solve problems.
It could. And so when we were talking about the grants, when I brought up the grants and things like that, the actual year-end statistical data, it may take another full year before you get a full grasp of what has happened in our state, because you're having to go to different locations right now. When and if we can get the entire state, 75 counties on MDI log, you go to one location.
Right.
Not all over the state. So that's even going to be, it will never be 100% real time, because, we're waiting for autopsy reports to come in. We're waiting on things like that. But that's a very, toxicology, correct. But that's a very small percentage of the grand scheme of things. We're looking at a very small percentage, maybe 10%. The rest of the 90% is real-time data.
Right. So in the grand scheme of things, if we reported that we had 541 overdose deaths in 2020, in your opinion, from your professional opinion, would that be an accurate figure?
That'd be a lot closer than where we are right now.
Right.
I believe so.
Would you say that we're still underreported?
I believe so. I do.
And we're not. It's not unique to Arkansas. I know coroners, and listening to this issue across the nation, all have this issue. And one thing I noticed during COVID, that we can turn on the television every day at noon and we can see the exact death number. Having a system like that is kind of like what we're trying to build, so we can actually look at those numbers and utilize that numbers for resolve. Resolve for the coroners, resolve for the families, resolve for law enforcement, and resolve to the opioid issue. Would you agree?
I would agree. The other aspect of that is knowing where our counties lie, where our problems lie. That will also give our county governments more information to know where to fight these drugs, where to fight, or violent deaths, or whatever the case may be, whatever statistical data they're gleaning from the MDI log. It will give them that opportunity to be able to do better and do more for their locations and their counties than they've ever been able to do before.
Well, respectfully, Kevin, I'd like to put you on the spot. Why do we have resistance in some of our coroners?
You are going to put me on the spot. I think there's a lot of different reasons, but I think if I had to pick two, I would say number one is the majority of our counties, our county governments, and I'm probably going to ruffle some feathers when I say this. The majority of our county governments view the coroner's office as part-time, and they're not funded. They do not have the funding that they need to go out and have enough staff to do the investigations. They don't have transport vehicles that they can transport a body with. They don't have offices where they can go and hold those bodies. They're relying on funeral homes and so forth. And in a lot of counties that works. I'm not going to knock funeral homes because we need those a lot of times. And it may be that the funeral director and the coroner are one and the same, and that works in that county. That's perfect for that county. Right. But it's not a funeral home's responsibility to fund that county office. And a lot of times that's what's happening, or the coroner is not associated with a funeral home and the county still views them as a part-time office. Well, they're elected 365, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, not part-time. And people die at all given hours of the day and night. So I understand a lot of our smaller counties that the call volume is not high enough to pay a full-time salary a lot of times. Right. But there needs to be some understanding that the coroner has a job to do to answer the questions for his county. And he needs the funding and the equipment to do that job. So I think that's one of the biggest problems that we face across the state. The other one is the mentality of, well, if it's don't broke, don't fix it. We've proven, I think, over the last few years that our system is broke and it needs to be fixed. We need to do everything that we can to do the best. We deserve, or rather not we, but our citizens of our counties deserve the very best that we can possibly give them. And if we're not giving them the very best, then we need to be doing what we can to get it to the very best of our abilities. And I think a lot of the times that there's a mentality that we've done it this way for so many years, there's no reason for us to do it. This is my buddy over here, and I don't want that. This family doesn't need that stigma of an overdose in their family, so we're just going to call it whatever. And I hope that's not what is happening in our counties and in our state. We have some amazing coroners in our state.
We sure do.
But we also have some that just, as amazing of individuals as they are, our counties have set them up to fail.
Sure. So in that aspect, Kevin, personally to you, how important is the role of the coroner in the resolve of the opioid epidemic?
I think it's crucial. I think it's probably one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle for not just our law enforcement, but I know we've worked statewide on the lawsuit that the entire state is in. All the counties and so forth. I know we worked. The association worked diligently with the attorneys that were working on the lawsuit in obtaining some of the statistical data, and it's that information, that data, that is what is going to drive a lot of this, the results of that lawsuit and so forth. But that has to come from the death investigators, the coroners that are keeping the statistical information or keeping those coroner's reports, or should. My county, Saline County, I have 8 or 9 law enforcement agencies. Bryant doesn't know what Benton does. Benton doesn't know what Saline County does as far as their death rates. There's only one coroner's office in each county. And it is our job by law, by Arkansas state law, not just rules according to the Coroners Association, but Arkansas state law, that we are the proprietors of those death reports. It would stand to reason that we would be the agency that officials would come to for that statistical data. So the role of the coroner is crucial in obtaining that information and the death investigations of our opioid deaths or any drug related death.
So from dealing with the MDI log and utilizing it in your everyday duties, how difficult is that? How difficult is it to use the system?
When I first saw it, I'll be honest, it scared me to death.
And it could be one of the other points why coroners don't get on board.
It is, and I think a lot of it is. It was very, very daunting when I first saw it. But I can literally take my phone on a scene or my iPad or laptop, whatever may be in my unit that I drive. I could actually have a case file ready to go to the crime lab and waiting results in about 10 minutes.
That's amazing. My time in law enforcement and investigating death cases, I had numerous books in the trunk of my car. You probably remember I had different checklists in there to make sure that you dot every I and cross every T, because in a death investigation, you only get one chance. And so really a lot of times that what I saw of that MDI log really was that checklist to make sure that we dotted every I and followed every number like the way it should be. And that's, to me, is another resource for a coroner to make sure that they do a perfect job in investigating somebody's loved one's death.
Exactly. And the beauty of MDI log is that all those checklists and those books that you had in your trunk is, for car wrecks and for, airplane deaths or water deaths and things like that. MDI log has all of those checklists built into it to where if I put down it's a car accident, then it's going to auto-populate in there and prompt specific questions for me to ask about that, any related death or drug-related death. It's going to ask, specifically. So it's got all those checklists built into it.
It really is amazing.
So
and I was like, I wish I would have had that. I would have had a smaller car at the time.
Right. So, I understand.
So with that, I know the association and you have been very strong in helping coroners get on board and to recruit coroners, and I've been in there a little bit with you. What would you tell coroners that are watching today about the MDI log and how the Coroners Association can help them get on board?
We tell everyone, we actually, in our 40-hour course, we even teach on MDI log, show them. I always keep a case file that I need to put in open. That way, when I go and teach the class, I can put in a case file and show them exactly how fast it is, and I'm done. We teach everyone, when you get ready to look at MDI log, call me. Call one of the executive board members of the Coroners Association. There are 5 of us, and we're scattered out across the state. We will actually get on the phone with you or get on Zoom with you and walk you through every step of it. Any one of us will come to their office and set, because there's 2 different sides. There's an administrative side that the coroner will handle, or his chief deputy, whatever the case may be, to set everyone else up, and some logistics for the office. But then there's the investigation side. We will come to your office. We will help you set up the administrative side, teach you everything you need to know, and then we'll sit with every one of your deputies and teach them the investigation side on how to put these case files in and do it properly, where it won't, where it will benefit 100% your office. So we have tried to make this just as easy as we possibly can for any coroner that may come on. We pick on him all the time, but our Garland County coroner, Stuart Smedley, he's on our executive board. He's the treasurer for the Coroners Association. And he doesn't do computers. I'm going to tell you, he will mess up a computer more than anyone. Stuart can even use MDI log, and he brags about that every class we go to, that even he is able to do this.
That's great. So we have a lot of viewers, Kevin, on this podcast that are outside of coroners, and a lot of family of those that we have lost, and a lot of people that have a lot of passion to help with this issue. What would you tell them how to help us with this problem, how to engage their coroner if they're not on this program?
They're constitutional officers. You know, I say everywhere, I don't have a boss, but in truth, the citizens in my county, they are my boss. They're the ones who vote me into office every 4 years. I am not above reproach. You know, call me. You know, so what I would recommend is the citizens and those that are listening, call your coroners, talk to them. You tell them they've heard about MDI log and everything that it's doing and the potential that it can do for their counties, and encourage them. I mean, eventually, you know, so many, you know, we hear all the time the squeaky wheel gets the oil. You know, keep on them, keep on your elected officials. Talk to your sheriff, talk to your prosecuting attorney, talk to your county judge. You know, have them contact the coroner. Why are you not utilizing the system? You know, especially, you know, with our law enforcement family, when they can't get statistical information from that county and it affects the money that they get from grants on their drug interdiction and some of the other things that they utilize that grant money for. Well, it not only does it impact the coroner's office and the county, it impacts that other agency as well. Call them and ask them why is your coroner not on this? That would be my recommendation.
Thank you for that, and thank you for your work on that and trying to make the system so much better on that. So I want to change gears a little bit with you and kind of go back to what you're seeing. And I know we had visited about seeing different types of drugs in there, and I know you and I have had conversations about illicit fentanyl. But what is coroners in this state doing different now to safeguard themselves?
You know, we've always taken our precautions as far as wearing gloves, you know, things like that. But I think now more than ever, even beyond COVID, I know COVID really brought personal protective equipment to the forefront of any scene investigation, you know, with our gowns and our gloves and our mask and our goggles and so forth. If we're suspecting that this is a potential drug-related death, you know, number one, when we go into at least, and I'm going to speak for my office, when we go into a residence that's potentially drug-related, you know, I make sure that there's no airflow, there's no fans on, there's no air conditioning units, because I mean that's just blowing things around in the room. The fentanyl that we're seeing, the heroin, things like that, you know, you can inhale that. You can, you know, I don't touch it. You know, don't touch anything without nitrile gloves. And I wouldn't use just regular latex. Use nitrile. That should be scene investigation 101. You don't touch anything without gloves anyway. But
Sure.
but you know, we don't take for granted anything in the residence any longer. You know, boot covers. We don't take things home to our kids. That's the standards that we teach in the ARMDI course, the Medical Legal Death Investigation for Arkansas. We teach them, safety and precaution, because you never know. We don't know what has happened in that home before we walk into that house. We don't know what that pill may be, or what that powder in that on that piece of paper rolled up may be that we're going to move.
So how has drugs in your investigations changed?
Even back when I was a paramedic and on the streets going into the coroner's office, it was never a thought that I may have a powder here that on this body that, if I touch it with a latex glove, that it's going to absorb into my skin, and now, through the gloves, and that a lot of our drugs that we're seeing now, the fentanyl. Now I don't know of any confirmed carfentanil cases that we've had here in Arkansas as far as that goes, but carfentanil will absorb through your gloves. That was never a forethought when I first started. Now we have to worry about that. The synthetics that we're seeing, the synthetic fentanyls and so forth, they're so much more powerful that as a paramedic, I carried Narcan on an ambulance with me, as part of my drug supply. I never dreamed that we would see Narcan in pockets of everyday citizens and in police cars and fire trucks and everything all over the state of Arkansas or the country for that matter. I carry Narcan with me. We have to. It's never been that to that degree before until some of the drugs that we're seeing now.
Sure.
And they can overtake you quicker than what you'll ever expect.
One thing that we're seeing too is those polydrug combinations where they're mixing drugs together. So is it safe to say from your perspective that drugs today are a lot more dangerous than they ever have been?
Ever.
Any drug use could be your last drug or could be your last breath.
Kirk, we see more than ever. We see our victims with needles still in their arms, tourniquets still on their arms, straws in their nose. We see more of that kind of paraphernalia still in place because the drugs are so strong and so effective that it's killing them before they ever can take the needle out of their arm. And anytime we go in, if it's a methamphetamine user, I never suspect that it's strictly methamphetamine, because we're seeing more of our methamphetamines and our heroin that it's not really heroin, it's fentanyl, or the methamphetamine is combined with the fentanyl and so forth. Xanax bars that are packed, pressed with fentanyl. Some of the marijuana that's laced in fentanyl. So I never assume that if a family tells me, well, they're methamphetamine's their drug of choice. Okay, that may be methamphetamine, but what else is it? I have to assume that there's going to be something else in it.
So, Kevin, let me kind of conclude with this question. From your years of experience from being a coroner and your expertise of being a coroner, what would be your message to families and to those that may be utilizing, may be thinking about it, or may be struggling with an opioid or with a drug? What would be your message from your experience?
Families that think that your family member, your loved one, may have an opioid addiction. Number one, I learn and know the signs. I'm telling you, a lot of these people are very good at hiding it. They're good at hiding it, but they're not going to hide everything. Know the warning signs. Look for the warning signs. And if they are, if you're seeing that, you suspect that, or you know that your child or your loved one, whatever the case may be, is struggling with that addiction, don't give up on them. Number one, don't give up on them. There's hope. We have seen countless people in some of our sessions together and testimony of heroin addicts and fentanyl addicts that have beat it and survived.
Mm-hmm.
Don't give up on them. Get them the help they need. Contact your local coroner's office. Contact your local law enforcement, your drug director's office. There are resources out there to help you. As far as that goes, we'll do whatever we have to do to save a life. It would just thrill my heart if I never had to go on another drug overdose. But I get phone calls saying, "Hey, I need help. Can you help us?" I can't promise anyone that I can change an outcome, but I can promise that I'll do everything I can to change that outcome. And that would be my message: is don't give up on them. Get them all the help that you possibly can. So if that worst outcome does come, the pain is still going to be real. The pain is going to hurt. But at least you've done everything that you can, and that and you have reached out beforehand. There is a wealth of information and a wealth of knowledge in our state when it comes to our drug-related deaths. And I'm going to say it with you sitting at the table. You've kind of taken the bull by the horns in our state in that, and I appreciate that tremendously. I think now more than ever before. And I worked with the previous drug director before. I think that there are more resources for our families than ever before because of some of the work that you and your team has done, and that is greatly appreciated. So reach out to the drug director's office. Reach out to your local coroner and local law enforcement office. We'll do everything we can to help.
Well, I said I would conclude with that, but you kind of opened my mind to one more question, Kevin. I'm not going to let you get away easy, but how vital, and I know you have seen it throughout your county, how vital is Narcan in this equation?
It has saved multiple lives.
And I think there's some that say, how many times should we use it? How would you answer that?
You use it every chance you possibly can. If it takes, anytime you have that potential risk, keep using it. We met an individual that was it 7 times? Mm-hmm. 7 times that they revived him with Narcan, and now he's clean. If it takes 8, if it takes 12, do it 8 to 12 times.
And if they did that, it'd make your job easier too.
It would make my job easier. Yes, it would. I will not deny that. But you keep using it as often as it takes until it don't work or they're clean.
Thank you. So thank you, Kevin, for all that you do and your passion and your compassion to help other coroners and make a great state. And I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. If we can ever do anything for you or your office, just let us know.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to today's podcast. For more information about Arkansas's Drug Take-Back Day and to find an event or permanent Dropbox location, visit artakeback.com. Additionally, find more free resources by downloading the Arkansas app.